YouTubers, let's go ahead and create a new ASP.NET MVC project. For that, I'll go to File, New Project, and under Visual C#, I will choose the Web option. And in here, you will see that you have the ability to create a empty web application, the old web forms application, and Visual Studio 2012, as is right now, offers support for MVC 3 as well as the new MVC 4. So when you're doing this, make sure that you select MVC 4. I'm going to go ahead and then name my project Books Collection, and I'm going to click OK. Next, you're prompted for a project template. These different project templates have different amount of support for authentication, navigation, visual styles, and so on. Since this is a beginner's tutorial, we're going to keep it really simple and create a empty project so we can add each one of the files that we need manually. You also have the option for a view engine in here. We will be using the Razor View engine. So once you have empty and the view engine selected as Razor, click OK to create your solution. So now that Visual Studio is done creating the project, you can see that we have different numbers of files and folders displaying here in the Solution Explorer. This is the default structure of MVC4 project. Let's go ahead and try to run this project by clicking on Debug and start debugging here. You can see that we actually got an error here, and that's because we started with a empty project template. So the application doesn't have anything to run, so we get this HTTP 404 error here. Let's go ahead and you can either close Internet Explorer or you can stop debugging. You can see here in this drop down that I have Firefox and Chrome installed. So Visual Studio 2012 gives you the option to debug your project on either one of these browsers. I am going to stick with the Internet Explorer at this point. So let's go ahead and then add a new controller to our project. In the MVC4 architecture, incoming requests are handled by the controller, and since we didn't have a controller when we initially debugged the project, we got that HTTP 404 error, which is a not found error. These controllers are really simple, nothing but simple C# classes. Each one of the methods inside the controller that we're going to add in just a little bit, it's also known as an action method, meaning that you can invoke the method inside the controller via the URL to perform that action. And the MVC convention here is to put the controller in a folder called controllers, like we have it here. You don't have to follow these conventions, but if you do so, things are going to be a lot more smooth, especially if you're beginning with MVC4. So let's go ahead and then right click here on the controller, go to the add function of the menu and click controller. You're now prompted with this window here that says add controller. Let's go ahead and name this home controller. This is another MVC convention. The names that we give to the controllers should be descriptive and add with the word controller to the end. Under scaffolding options templates, Visual Studio gives you the ability to add controllers with different types of common actions already built into the controller, but at this point we're not going to use them, so let's go ahead and just choose empty MVC controller and click add. We now have a controller here. We have a home controller with a index action method that returns an action result, and that action result can be many things, including a view. But since we don't have a view right now, let's go ahead and just change this to a string just for testing purposes, and change this to hello world. And let's try to spell that correctly. And now I'm going to click on debug here, and we can see that we no longer have a 404 error here, but we actually have hello world. You may be asking yourself, how could it possibly know that we added this home index and is hitting it, since we didn't specify anything in here? And we're going to touch on that subject in just a second, but that's part of the routing engine's job to do that. And because we follow the convention here, the MVC convention of naming our first controller, the home controller, and leaving the first action method as the index method, it found that home index. Okay, it's also possible to go there and says, if you say home in here, it's also going to take you to the same place. You can also add index to the URL, and it takes you to the same place. Just for testing purposes here, I'm gonna put another method here, public string some action. Okay, we're not going to pass any parameters. It is possible to pass parameters, but I'm not going to pass any parameters at this point. And we're going to return another string here. This text is from some action. Okay, let's go ahead and run this one more time. And again, it hits the home index. But now if we navigate to home, some action, you can see that it's actually returning the text from that public action method. So at this point, just keep in mind that having a home controller and the index public action method, it's a good starting place for your application, especially if you haven't worked with the routing engine yet. Do that, and that will be your entry point for your MVC4 application. Next, let's go ahead and then add some views.